for getting us up to speed on that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Becky.
Let's take it to the next level. What does the outcome of the strike tell us about the future of unions? Joining us now, Ross Eisenbray of the Economic Policy Institute and Ivan Osorio with the Competitive Enterprise Institute. And I kind of led into it by asking Rebecca that question. Let me start with you, Ivan, and you have some interesting comments here. You say at this point, unions probably only work for the public sector because the public sector doesn't have to worry about costs anyway, so they might as well have unions. But the private sector, in this world today, it just doesn't make sense.
Certainly not in the form they exist now. I mean, unions, in their current form, are basically wedded to this very, very much an old-style industrial model whereby, somebody went to work for a company and was there for 20 years and eventually retired. 20, 30 years, and that people don't do that anymore. Definitely has to change, and this agreement basically shows, the limited options that unions have now when dealing with private employers.
Ross, you're outspoken, Ross, in that union workers are more productive. Unions are a force for good. Do you tie some of the problems we have in this country now in terms of wealth disparity to the declension of the unions?
Well, absolutely. When unions had 35% of the workforce organized, people were doing a lot better than they are now. We built the middle class, and people got benefits, pensions, wages that were rising as companies got more profits, and as their work was more productive, they shared in the benefit. And that's exactly why we need unions now. And to hear anyone say that unions aren't needed, if there weren't a union here at GM, they'd be moving offshore, twice as fast. They'd be cutting wages. The 73,000 people at GM would be so much worse off if they didn't have the UAW.
They're offshoring anyway.
Go ahead.
When EDS recently announced that it was moving 15,000 jobs offshore, there was no news. No one heard about it. There was no fight, no pushback. The workers had no voice. They just have to accept it. That's the difference. When you have a union, you have a voice.
What do you think, Ivan? I can look at this both ways, and I want us to be competitive globally, but I don't want when we're competitive here, I don't want all of that, all the benefits to accrue just to the managers of the company. Obviously, it hasn't been trickling down as it should to workers recently. How do we take care of that, Ivan?
Well, that's not to say that there isn't a role for unions. What unions need to do is to adapt to the current work environments. And as far as 35% of the private workforce, I mean that was back in the day when you had industries like steel, airlines, and autos that basically face very little competition. So once you have more competition, you have to control costs. And back to this agreement, and it's dealing for GM, one of the biggest benefits that it deals with the issue of legacy costs and to help for healthcare benefits. And this is something that really dates back to the era of when unions could basically ask for very generous contracts, and basically a lot of these companies just went along because it was just much easier to basically pay more rather than risk a strike.
Hey, Ross, what about do we want to go to the style that Europe has where you have these rigid labor laws, you can't hire anyone because you can't ever lay them off because you got to pay them 95% of what they make if you lay them off. So then you got, double-digit unemployment. Well, you don't move into industries quickly enough that the rest of to be globally competitive. Aren't you shooting yourself in the foot with unions?
That's a real misnomer. There are countries in Europe like Germany that have more exports, a better trade balance. They export more and import less than the U.S. does. So clearly those companies are globally competitive. Little countries like Denmark that have much more of their economy that's in trade, where they really do manage to leave no worker behind. The key isn't to, have rigid, as you say, rigid job protections. It's to make sure that
what about a job guarantee? How can an auto worker have a job guarantee given that around the world you can get guys to do the same thing for $20 an hour? How can GM afford to do that?
Well, here's the key. If we had national health insurance, GM wouldn't be in the problem that it's in right now. If everybody in America had a guaranteed health insurance package, that was provided by the government the way it is in almost every
Well, that's a different
industrialized
issue
country
than
in the world.
unions. Then we wouldn't need unions, I guess.
How much of
Well,
this is a problem that the
then they'd be
unions need to
competing
globalize
on,
like companies have?
then they'd be competing on their product, and they wouldn't be competing by having to carry, 3 retirees on their back for every active worker.
Ross, are you optimistic at all that we go up from 7% in the future, or are unions just invariably going to be gone eventually?
We have a real problem with our labor law, and I hope that we're going to have a Congress that will pass the Employee Free Choice Act that will make it easier for people to join unions. A majority of Americans right now, when they're asked, say they want to be in a union, but they can't find a way to do it.
Okay. All right, gentlemen. Thank you to Ross and Ivan. And
Thank you.
Answered a few questions there.
Well, a big part of it is the unions have to look around the globe and globalize as well, because if people are making that much less somewhere else, the only way you make that disparity go away is by globalizing them.
And you've seen
bringing them into
evidence of that, Walmart in China. Whether or not they can do that down the road is a different story. Big morning on the way. Durable goods